One thing your book also does is actually compares the auto industry in the United States with the auto industry in Canada, which is again right next to us. Right, it really is so interesting of how the workers responded in Canada to the Great Recession and the way we responded here. Compare the two and their responses. Once the giant attack, once the recession actually went down.
Sure. So policies make a big difference, right? And in Canada, there is a somewhat stronger safety net for when you fall into unemployment, when you fall into long-term unemployment. There's someone to fall back on in terms of government assistance. Things like job retraining, things like single-payer health care. Universal health care makes a big difference, and it made a big difference for my workers. One of my workers, for instance, had to go to the ER, and he was an American worker. He ended up with a $1,000 bill because he didn't have insurance. And that is a huge blow if you are long-term unemployed and barely making it, and maybe your unemployment benefits have already expired, right? So this is a problem on the American side. Hopefully the healthcare reforms will improve the situation. But that said, I think that the infrastructure, the system of assistance has been kind of starved for help and starved for good implementation. And there's a story that I tell about a worker by the name of Ken who fell into unemployment, and he went through tough times. His wife left him in part because he couldn't provide. He was losing his house. And he was severely depressed, right? He actually had thoughts of suicide, and he, tried to get help. To his credit, he turned to Medicaid for insurance, but in the state, they were not accepting new enrollees at the time because they were just strapped. So he went to a state job center, asked about therapy there, and was told, there's a 2-month wait. I mean, he said, you could commit suicide tomorrow, yet we have to wait for some kind of assistance. So what he ended up doing, Ken, was go to a local church, and he looked for some kind of group support, and he joined Narcotics Anonymous. He didn't even have a drug problem, but he went to those sessions because he said, they listened to him. So I think that these kinds of policies, definitely make a difference in people who are struggling to pull themselves up and deal with despair that comes with being unemployed. And I think Canada does a generally better job in that, though with some caveats, one of them being that they have pared back their safety net as well, too, in recent years, even under more liberal governments, they've done that. And it speaks to the growing competition and the growing pressures on governments to pare back their kind of help because of the drumbeat from economic elites who do not benefit from a large government role in the economy, and so have been pushing that in a variety of countries, not just the United States.
In the book, you definitely talk about I mean, you just mentioned one worker now, but like you tell the stories of so many of people who lost their jobs and again couldn't find work. You actually write about the idea that companies now don't actually want to hire ex-auto workers because they fear that they might form a union. Talk a little bit about the struggles of, I mean, obviously the struggle of getting healthcare is obviously something, but talk a little bit about the struggles that these ex-auto workers had and how it affected their lives. Because not just even like, say, the, paying their bills and keeping their house and all that stuff, but how it affected them psychologically, how it affected their overall lives.
Yeah, I start the book with the story of John, a auto worker who had worked for decades in first construction and then in a plant where he had a skilled trade there as a polisher, and a polisher of chrome bumpers for trucks. And he, he was abandoned by his parents when he was a baby. He was raised by his grandmother, and he had a hole inside of him because of that background. And to some extent, his job, his work, filled that hole. He said, to me that my job was like my mother and father to me, right? It was all I had, and it was something I could depend on, right? And suddenly, he was laid off. He was cut loose, he said, and he, really struggled with that because he felt, to some extent betrayed by the company, and yet, he would talk about too the union being a problem and how it paid people too much and so on. So there was a mixed set of emotions that he went through. But fundamentally that speaks to how things have changed, right? He played by the rules. He worked hard. He helped the company, he thought. But there's no more kind of promises in this economy, right? There's nothing like what we had during, earlier in the last century where, companies and corporate leaders felt some kind of obligation to their workers, and they set up company towns like Hershey and Kaiser Permanente set up these nice company towns for their workers to help their families with healthcare and education and things like that. And right now there's not really a sense that there is any kind of obligation to your worker unless you are someone that works at, say, Google or Microsoft or so on, where you have, free food and massages and all this kind of care. That's not the situation for, workers in the middle and lower ends of the labor market anymore. We've really changed our priorities as a country. And I think it hurts a lot of workers to feel like, discarded in that way. And it's something that, really gets to them psychologically, in addition to just the loss of their sense of identity, their sense of self. Work is central to who we are, right? It's the first thing you ask someone when you're at a party, right? What do you do? And the loss of that really creates a disorientation, and it creates tensions too with their spouses and families, right? I talked to you about a worker named Royce who, lost his job, sunk into depression, and sunk into a set of poisonous kind of relations with his wife because he couldn't provide anymore, and she was, to some extent resentful of that, and they would have shouting matches, and their younger son would be, huddling in the corner, crying because of the yelling that was going on. We kind of forget the economic. We focus on the economic costs of unemployment, but we forget the social costs. We forget the costs on households, the costs on families to go through these periods of hopelessness where they're struggling to get by. And among many of my workers, it led to divorce, it led to separations, it led to pretty noxious relationships in their households because, that is so fundamental, the ability to provide, the ability to help out your family. And these people were separated from those identities and that kind of way of life.